for me to have gone through what I've been dealing with the Department of DCFS of Los Angeles. For them to have taken advantage of me and my family the way that they have, and then expected me to fold and crumble because so many of us do, because really I am just as big as DCFS with the help of the Vincent Davis Law Firm. He helped me get my baby back. He helped me clear my name. You know what? I didn't even make it to trial. The trial that they forced. Mr. Davis showed up ready to go. They ran. They never even wanted to talk to him. They never wanted to take the stand. They never wanted to go on trial. And when I say they, I mean all of the people who were there representing DCFS. Even the council's attorney, the DCFS attorney, was trying to negotiate some things after he saw that I had such a faith in my attorney and his staff, that I had this new faith and this new solidness about myself. I wasn't scared anymore. Mr. Davis was able to not only help me get my child back, but he was able to get all of the charges dismissed. He was able to get all of the false accusations dropped. And we did it without even having to take a foot on the stand.
Good morning. I'm Attorney Vince Davis, and these are my CPS office hours. I'm joined by my co-host, Miss G. Miss G, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Tired, sleepy. How are you?
Did you just wake up?
I had to put the scarf on my head.
Is 6:30 too early for you? Because I was thinking about moving the time of the show to 6 a.m.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's not bad during the work days because I work, but obviously you know that. But on the weekends, I like to sleep in. So but it's okay. I'll do my best to wake up on time.
So you could make it at 6 a.m.?
If I can't make it at 6:30. Are you talking about on the weekdays? Yes, I could do 6 a.m. on the weekdays.
What about on the weekend?
No. I'm barely making 6:30 right now.
Okay. Well,
but you know what? I can try. That's not a big deal.
All right. Well.
Or you can wake me up. I mean, like, call me like twice. Like you called me today, right?
I called you today and it was like, oh, what time is
I was
it?
like, hello.
The show starts in 5 minutes. Okay, so I had a topic that I was ready to go with, family reunification, but I forgot that yesterday you took a bunch of questions after I left, and you wanted me to answer the viewers' questions. So go ahead. I'm ready for the questions.
So Jatea Valentine had so many questions. She emailed me, or he emailed me several questions. Okay. So one question: how can I challenge a U.S. judge decision to grant temporary custody to a relative based solely on incomplete, untranslated, and undocumented, I don't understand, foreign documents, especially when the judge is holding private conversations with Canadian authorities and the relative without me present? Basically, unlawful due process from circuit county judge and a relative abusing the system to make false reports and restraining orders.
And her question is, how can she challenge this?
Yeah.
She's going to have to appeal. Either take an emergency appeal or a regular appeal. That's the only way she can do it.
Okay.
She needs to
Mention
talk
something
to an
about
appellate.
Canadian. I don't
Needs to
know.
talk to an appellate attorney in her state or in that country, Canada.
Okay.
And I seem to recall talking to someone, an American citizen who lived in, I think, New York,
Mm-hmm.
who caught a CPS case in Canada while she was visiting, but she actually lives in New York, and Canada took jurisdiction over the child or the children. And she had a terrible time. And then on top of that, she caught a case in, I think, Florida. So she was
Oh.
dealing with, New York, Canada, and Florida, and it was one of the most complicated procedural cases that I had ever heard of. And you know, she wasn't able to hire a private attorney in any of those states or countries, but she does need legal help. And I told her that if she was working on the case by herself. I told her that she needs to talk to some appellate attorneys in each of those, in Canada and in those two states to try to get some relief. The other thing that she could try to do
Mm-hmm.
is, and I didn't mention this to her, she could try to speak to someone about bringing an action in federal court, and try to exercise jurisdiction in one state. And I think her home state was New York. For example, bring a federal case in New York and try to bring in, the agency from Canada and the agency from Florida. So that's one of the things that she should consider doing.
Okay. Question number 2. What legal remedies exist to report and stop judicial misconduct when a judge violates due process by excluding a parent from hearings, allowing ex parte communications, issuing no contact orders without proper findings of danger, and encouraging a third party to domesticate foreign documents to claim custody of U.S. citizen children?
Is that from the same question person? Is that the same questioner? Okay. Again, she has to get an appellate process going. She has to get an attorney who can do those appeals. Unfortunately, I don't think she's able to do them by themselves. And,
No.
one of the things that I mentioned to her is she should make complaints against judicial officers in the state where the judge is a judge. So, for example, if it was California, she could make a complaint to the state judicial council. There's a governing body that actually investigates complaints against judges. And I assume or would bet there's the same thing in New York, same thing in Florida, and the same thing in Canada.
She has really good questions. How does filing a federal complaint or constitutional challenge under 42 USC 1983 or another statute for systematic violation of due process, equal protection, and parental rights, especially when the judge is coordinating across jurisdictions without proper notice, hearings, or lawful orders when my case?
Well, that's what I was asking or telling you earlier. She could try to bring a lawsuit in, for example, her home state, which is New York, and try to bring in Florida into that case. I don't think she's going to be able to bring in Canada, but she can try. She has what is known as a civil procedural nightmare on her hands.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just by, luck of the draw that she got, in this situation. I mean, as I recall talking to her, to have a CPS case in Canada, New York, and Florida, I mean, that's highly unusual.
Okay. How to stop a judge who is unlawfully issuing a contact order between parents and their children based solely on an unproven nonviolent false arrest with the charge that's not even gone to court yet, especially when the parents has never had their rights terminated and no findings of abuse or neglect have been made in the USA.
It's the same thing. It's appeal. That's the only thing that you can do. The only thing that is going to help her is appeal or revolution. That's it. And revolution is probably not going to work for her. So she's got to appeal. And she's got to win. One of her, I want to say, issues is she has a lot of ideas, but she's not implementing any of them. Have you ever heard me talk about that before with people?
All the time.
Yeah. You come up with all of these ideas, but you're not implementing anything. So you're basically frozen. Even in the simplest case, you come up with ideas and you don't pursue them. A lot of times I talk to people who come up with ideas and they're just wrong ideas. They're bad ideas. They're bad strategies. They should be going right, and instead they're going left. And then because they've thought about it so much and they've convinced themselves, they've brainwashed themselves that going right is the only way to get this done. And then, when they finally go right and realize that they've done the wrong thing, then it's too late. And, the time has ticked away and they're losing their child. I think I've told you this story before. There was a man, a father, who I felt really got the short end of the stick in a CPS case. And he hired me to go up north in California to do this case. It was a trial. And from what he told me, he had a colorable case where I thought he could at least maybe have a chance winning the jurisdictional hearing, but had a very good chance at winning the dispositional hearing and getting his daughter back. He hired me, he paid me money, and maybe a week after he hired me, he sent me an email with a detailed outline strategy for me to take. And it was completely off the wall. It was not even, I won't even call it a legal strategy. It was a strategy that he bought off the internet for $49 from a non-lawyer who was called himself a constitutional expert. And the strategy was based upon all of this. And he insisted that I, implement the strategy. And I explained to him why this strategy wouldn't work. And, my explanations fell on deaf ears. And finally, I told him, I said, hey, if you want me to do this, I'm not going to do it. So, you might as well fire me and, I'll refund your money. And he said, oh, all my money? I said, yeah, I'll refund all of your money. So I refunded all of his money. He went forward with that strategy in the California courtroom, and he lost. And he called me back about 6 months later. And to his credit, he says to me, Mr. Davis, you were absolutely right. He says, that strategy was completely wrong. And now I know it. And I wasted $49 listening to a non-attorney that I found on the internet with some crazy strategy that wasn't based in any law or fact. But it just seemed like, it was like a shiny new object syndrome. Oh, here's a great idea that I've never heard about. Seems to make sense. And I'm just going to risk my child's, me getting my child back and try to implement the strategy. And it was just, wrong. And he asked me, he says, what would it take for me to come back on his case? And I said, I wouldn't come back on the case. I told him, the case is so messed up now for me to, really straighten out that accident. It would just be too much time, too expensive. And, I said, our history together, wasn't a pristine one. I said it was just, it would be too much. And I didn't want to go through it.
Oh, did this happen last year?
No, this happened maybe 5-6 years ago. No, it had to be longer because it was before COVID. It was before COVID.
I thought you were talking about another client that we had.
I know, but they're all, they're all similar stories.
Yeah, there's so many clients who do that. They listen either to somebody online or they Google it themselves and they think they have the answer.
Yeah. There's one thing I will say is that the internet is a good thing. It gives a lot of information and lets people communicate and exchange ideas, but it can be a very dangerous tool. It could take you down the wrong path very easily.
I agree. There's another question, but I think I know the answer for this one, but hey, I'll let you speak it. How to stop the wrongful act of DCFS CPS to initiate a case against me based on allegations stemming from a false police report and a custody dispute when I never had the children in my physical care in Florida. And there is no valid custody order guardianship in the USA transferring rights to the aunt. I've not had the kids residing with me since January 2024 when Montreal took them, when Canada took them.
Yeah, this is the same lady from the first.
Yeah, it's all the same lady. That's why I told you she has a lot of questions.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I've answered all of these questions before talking to her on the phone. She has to appeal, and she has to win. All of these decisions have already been made by the judge. She's asking me to tell her how to stop the judge from making this decision. The judge has already made these decisions. What she has to do is appeal them.
And that goes for demanding a dismissal of the aunt custody claim, right?
No, she already did that. So she's asking me questions that she should have asked before she had the hearings, but she's post-hearing. So the only thing that she can do is appeal. And as I recall, and I may not be correct, but as I recall, the time for hearing probably has passed.
Oh my gosh.
She had a very complicated factual story as well. And, it's one of those things, that factual scenario would never happen to anyone unless the stars align just the right way. It's like one in a lifetime situation. Like, how do you get a case in Canada, New York, and Florida all at the same time? That's, have you ever heard of that before?
Oh, yeah.
No, I haven't. I've heard of cases like in California and Nevada or California and Arizona, but I've never heard of a case in 2 states and an international country.
I have.
That
I actually still speak to the dad today. I mean, he just called me last night. Me and him been talking for 2 years. He didn't win. He didn't win.
That's an incredible bad luck situation.
I know.
All right, next question.
It's very, very sad. Okay, so her questions are already answered. I know she has a lot of questions, but Jatea, if I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Attorney Davis answered your questions, but I will call you after the show when I'm having my 3rd cup of coffee so I can truly wake up. I will call you. You did provide me your phone number. I also want to address something that Christina wrote in North California, or I don't know what county. She said, I want to hire you. So if you want, Christina, I think you and I spoke, but you can email me if you like, if it's the same Christina. at gat@vincentwdavis.com. Please email me your phone number, your contact information if we and I have not spoken before. And I'm going to write it down for you. Did I put my email? Oh, that's what happens when you only have one cup of coffee, Vincent. Vincent W. Davis.com. At vincentwdavis.com. There we go. So I just put my email out there. Here it is underneath Attorney Davis's chin. gat@vincentwdavis.com. You can just send me your information. I'll be happy to speak with you today, actually. Okay. I have other questions, Attorney Davis. One second.
Okay.
Um,
Anytime now. It is a live show.
okay, so this case is in San Diego.
Okay.
Okay, me and her already spoke. Okay, so this case is in San Diego. 4 kids are involved. The foster mom was her best friend, and she used information that she shared with her for years with CPS to remove her children, including her new baby that was born, and to collect money. She has evidence in text messages what the best friend told her, that she's lucky that she's getting another child because they're giving tax increase, blah blah. I mean, incentives for every child, increasing the incentive for every child. And she said, "I wish I had kids. I wish I can adopt yours." Ha 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 ha. Her friend laughed, and she wants to know why CPS and her court-appointed attorney don't want to use that as evidence in court.
Because it's irrelevant. The only question in the case.
What the hell? Are you serious right now?
Yeah. The only thing that's an issue in the court is whether the mother is a danger or risk, depending on the stage of the case, to the child. What the foster mother is doing is irrelevant to that issue.
But that was her best friend for like years.
It was. I'm so sorry about that.
I understand that, but okay, and I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not. Okay. I trust what you're saying.
Yeah. I've only been doing it almost 40 years, Miss G.
I know.
It leaves a bad taste in your mouth, I know. A lot of things about the law leave a bad taste in people's mouths. But you want to know how to win? I'll tell you how to win. And a lot of times I tell people, even you don't like it. But I'll tell you how to win. Whether you accept that and take my advice, that's a whole nother story.
First of all, I never take your advice, okay?
You know what? A lot of times, in a lot of conversations, and I don't mind having these conversations, but a lot of conversations I have with people, maybe 50% of the time is spent on them complaining about what the law is. And I don't have anything to do with that. You know, the legislature of California has something to do with that. The appellate courts in California have something to do with that. Me, I just tell you how to win based upon those quote unquote unfair laws.
I think people got the wrong idea when they speak with you, or any attorney, I believe, is that they think they can vent out with you and, complaining about, because sometimes I found myself doing that. I complain to you about, the unfairness of the system, but you're like looking at me or hearing me kind of like, yeah, but what you gonna do? Right.
Because, a lot of people, for example, Friday, a woman came to the office or maybe it was Thursday. But anyway, she came to the office and she paid me for a consult. And about 10 minutes into it, I realized this is going to be a complaining session, but she's paying me for a consult, right? And about 10 minutes in, so I stop her and I say, hey, we could, talk forever about, your feelings about how things are unfair, or you can get right to the questions of what you want to know and how you can win this case. Now, you would think that that's, an indicator of what we should be talking about.
Okay.
Well, she went in for the next 40 minutes still complaining about the law and about, different aspects of the case and how unfair it was. She was, it was one of those things. She's on module 4 and she's telling me about module 1, even though I've told her module 1 doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. And, she found that hard to believe. So we get down to her last 5 minutes in the hour. And then she says, she asks me the first important question. And we talk about that for about 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And she looks down at her watch and she goes, well, we're over the hour. I go, yeah. I said, you've been, I told you. Well, why are we talking about all this? And she said, just what you just said. She said, I just wanted to vent to someone. Nobody listens to me. She said, my boyfriend
Hello,
doesn't.
they vent that with me for hours.
She said, my boyfriend doesn't listen to me. My family doesn't listen to me. My social worker doesn't listen to me. My kids are all in foster care, so they can't listen to me. And I thought, she's supposed to be in counseling. Maybe she should be talking to her counselor about this. But I understand what you're saying. Most people want to vent and they need
But
somebody
they
to
can
listen.
vent with me. I told them that. You want to pay for a consultation? Pay for the consultation, but ask questions, listen to the answers. But if you want to vent with me after work hours. Usually I give them 45 minutes to an hour to talk to me sometimes during the work hours. But then if they're going to go on venting, then yes, I don't mind talking to them after work hours. Okay. I'm serious, but you guys want to pay for a consultation, make it worth your while, get the answers that you need from Attorney Davis and to be able to help you. Okay. The second question for this parent asked, the social worker threatened to remove my judge and get another judge. What do you think that means to my case?
That maybe the judge is sympathetic towards you and that the judge is going to rule in your favor.
Wow. So the social workers have right, well, I shouldn't even say power because they're so demonic. My God. So the social workers can request for another judge. I mean, that's how powerful they are.
No, they have the same rights as you. You can request another judge as well. Doesn't mean that you're going to get it. Doesn't mean that the social worker is going to get it. But you can make those requests. Any
But the
party
social
to the
workers
case.
usually do get it. That's why there's so many parents with 2-3 different judges.
No, that's not accurate. That's not accurate.
Hmm.
Most of the time, even if they think the judge is going to be against them, I would say the majority of the time they just keep that judge. Now, I have seen cases where social workers' attorneys file what's called a 170.6 affidavit to get a new judge. I've seen that happen, but it's
Right.
rare. It's rare.
Wow, that's crazy.
I see more parents' attorneys like me filing a 170.6 to get a new judge.
Wow. Okay. The other question is, a second. My sister lives in Virginia and she has a huge home, stable marriage, stable jobs, her and her husband, and they have one child who is in high school. I offered and requested for my sister for the children to be transferred to my sister. But the social worker said they're not allowed to transfer out of state. They have to remain in California. Is that true?
No, it's an outright mistake of law, or she's lying to you. It's one or the other. It's not true. As a matter of fact, um, if this is your sister, that means it's an aunt to the children or child.
Mhm.
Children are supposed to be placed with her. Now, there's a process to make that happen, and it's called the ICPC process.
Oh, yeah.
A regular ICPC process, the Interstate Compact for the
Mhm.
placement of children, ICPC, can take months, but after the disposition hearing, I think you can, I know you can ask for something called an expedited ICPC, which only takes 30 days. So if you have relatives that live out of state, it doesn't matter. The relative or family member or family friend can live out of the country. So, it doesn't matter. Here in California, I used to get a lot of cases involving people with relatives in Mexico. And
Mhm.
Mexico is a signatory to one of the Hague treaties among countries and nations where you can place a child from Los Angeles, for example, in Mexico. Mexico has a whole CPS system, and I think they're known as DIF. And I forget
Yeah.
what it means, some domestic, some international familia, something like that. But they have their own CPS system, and they will do an investigation on a family in Mexico and write a report for the judge here in California or in Los Angeles, either approving or denying a relative in Mexico for the placement of a child in Mexico.
But didn't we already agree on the fact that they would lose funding if the kids were transferred to another state?
Yeah, not total funding, not 100%, but yeah, but the bulk of the money follows the child.
Mm-hmm. That's why they don't want to do that.
Well, I think from my observation, that may be one of the driving forces, but I think the biggest thing people or social workers don't want to do is they don't want to lose control of the case. Because if the case is sent to Virginia, that social worker becomes basically in control of the case and reports back to the judge here in California. And the California social worker, basically becomes a paper pusher, right? Because they don't have contact with the kids anymore. Who
Right.
does? It's the Virginia social worker.
Okay. Next question from someone else. Mr. Davis, you did mention the 6.26 hearing. However, I was told by the social worker yesterday that they already knew that the children were going to be adopted from day one. And the social worker laughed at me, and I told her I will record her, and she said nobody's going to listen to me. The judges always believes them, and they are untouchable. What can I do, Mr. Davis, at this point?
You're probably going to need a good attorney,
Wow.
because if you're coming up on the 2-6 hearing,
Yep.
you are deep into your case.
Yep.
And you haven't gotten your kid back thus far. And there may be reasons why you haven't gotten your child back. I don't know your case, but there might be good reasons why you haven't gotten your child back. And if there are, you lose credibility, as the case goes on with the social worker, with the judge. You're dealing with people, right?
Demons.
And what do people think if you're not doing your case plan? What do people think if you're still using drugs? What do people think if you're not visiting your child? What do people think if you're not doing your domestic violence counseling? What do people think if you're not doing your substance abuse counseling? Well, unfortunately, people sometimes have a negative reaction to that, right? So you and your attorney are going to have to come up with a strategy to turn that around. Now, you can turn it around. It's going to be hard. It's going to be work, right? I hate to say that W word because people don't like it. It's going to be work, but you can do it, and don't give up.
I would like to add to that. I would like to actually say something about what you just said, about completing classes and domestic violence classes and all that, and visitation, on time and all that. 98% of the time, the social workers or the foster parents cancels the visitations, and they put down on the reports that the mother or the father never showed up. I get so many calls. I'm talking about from different states, different counties, you name it, Davis. Like last night, by the way, I had the last two calls. One was from Arkansas, the other one from Utah, and they both said the same thing to me. The social workers canceled the visitations and wrote down in the report the mother never showed up. She said they both had proof. They both had proof. But their attorney said the judge doesn't want evidence submitted into court. And these are two different states. Okay, so they're doing everything in their power right now to make it look like the parents are not showing up.
But, Miss G, I've told you, but you didn't attend this seminar, but I've told people how to fix that problem.
Seminar.
Yeah, I did a seminar on reunification, a Saturday seminar. Remember when we used to do those seminars? In one seminar I did, and it's probably one of the best seminars I ever did. I did a seminar on what you should do during the reunification process that takes away and proves or helps prove all of the lies or mistakes that a social worker will put in a 6-month report about you, like, mother didn't show up for the visitation.
Oh my God, where is that video? I can share it with people.
It was a paid course, so I don't know if Grace will give it to you. But you can ask Grace. I don't know where it is. Grace has it in the vault.
Oh, if it's a paid course, can they? I mean, is it still on? I'm not sure.
Grace has it stored somewhere in a Google Drive someplace. But I'm going to tell you what this person should be doing or should have done. Every week, okay, this is the work part of this. The person should be sending an email to the social worker, to her attorney, that summarizes what she learned in each course, each counseling session.
Oh, yeah.
And each visitation. So that Friday or Saturday, she would have sent an email that said, my visitations were canceled by the foster mother, were canceled by the social worker. And I sent an email to the social worker to make up that visit. Okay? That's sent on that Friday or Saturday. Now, at the end of the 6-month period, the social worker knows that email exists. Do you think that social worker is now going to write 5 months later, 4 months later, the mother didn't show up?
Oh my God.
Probably not. Because
you don't think about that.
You took the preemptive step to document that they canceled the visit. So the social worker can't play that card. Have you ever played a card game called Spades or Uno or Big Whist?
Uno, yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of that kind of strategy. You got to trump her before she lies or before she makes that mistake.
You got to trump her before she makes that lie.
And then you take your weekly emails, you put them in a notebook, They're all typed out. They're week 1, week 2, you put the dates, and then you have 6 months of emails. You have four emails per month, so you have 6 times 4. You have 24 summaries for courses, classes, testing, visits.
Good.
You have 24 of those. Put them in a notebook. You make 5 or 6 copies. Your attorney's been getting them weekly, and then you give it to him. You give him the 6 copies, one for the judge, one for the minor's attorney, one for the social worker and her attorney, one for the court clerk. And you say, here, introduce all of these into evidence.
Wow.
And then everybody's like, oh, wow. Oh, we can't prove anything against this parent. Wow, look what this parent has learned. And then when you get up on the stand, because they're going to put you on the stand and say, well, Ms. G, what'd you learn in the last 6 months in your parenting class? Well, let's go through it week by week.
Mm.
In week 1, I learned blah, blah, blah. Like I told you in the email during week 1.
Right.
Here it is. I summarized it for you. Not only did I tell you what I learned, I told you 3 ways how I am implementing it or going to implement it in my life.
Mm.
Then you go to week 2 and you take the judge through the 24 weeks if he or she wants to hear it. I can assure you, I bet $1 by week 3, the judge is going to say, okay, I get it. Okay, I get it. You did everything you were supposed to do. You learned, you internalized it. So when the social worker said you didn't learn anything and you didn't go to anything or you missed visit, that was all bullshit. Because you documented everything.
What if the social worker says, we don't believe that they learned anything?
Well, you took 24 weeks and every week you explained what you learned. You did it weekly. It's going to be hard for someone to say, I don't believe you. Not only did you summarize what you learned that week, you then told the person and the judge, because this is going to end up in front of the judge, how you're going to use it. 3 ways how you're going to use it in your life or how you are now using it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's domestic violence or anger management, how you're using it now. If it's parenting, how you're going to use it when the kids come home.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, I won't call it foolproof, but this is about as foolproof as you're going to ever get.
Right.
And it's because of the way you present it and you send it to the social worker every week.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, one of the people that you're supposed to send it to is the counselor that you're going to. So that he or she can't tell the social worker at the end of the 6-month period, oh, Georgette didn't learn shit. Because the counselor now knows weekly you're reporting to the counselor as well what you learned in that damn parenting class.
Wow.
What you learned in the DV class, what you learned in the anger management. Because she cannot, at the end of the 6-month period, she cannot then say, oh, Georgette didn't learn blah, blah, blah. Well, yes, she did. At week 14, she wrote to you and said, blah, blah, blah. This is what she learned. This is how she's going to implement it. She wrote again about it at week 18. What the hell are you talking about? At the end of the 24 weeks, she dare not say that. Oh, yeah. And believe me, if she gets an email every week for 24 weeks, they can't say anything. You beat them to the punch.
I have one thing to add to that, and correct me if I'm wrong. Do you recommend parents using, instead of using emotional writing, because sometimes when you get angry or you're so exhausted mentally, physically, emotionally, your writing becomes more emotional writing than logical writing, right? Do you recommend for them to use AI to write an email Okay, wait. That
Well,
look is priceless.
I don't want to say I recommend it because this is supposed to be coming from your heart. But I do know people who use AI.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm not saying I recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do use it, you better damn well adopt what AI said
Mm-hmm.
because you might be asked about it on the witness stand at the contested 6-month hearing.
Oh, wait. Hold up. They ask you about that?
Absolutely. That's how most
Since
people
when?
that's what most people lose their 6-month hearing. It
Wait,
puts you on.
We're talking about an email. Oh. But AI, I'm talking about writing.
You got to follow along, GT.
Trying.
You have to follow along. One of the reasons, even though you had your own case, you never really testified in your case. And I've talked to you about your case, but you had one of those cases that so much you focused on the unfair part of your case too much. You didn't focus on winning your case. You were focused on how screwed you were getting. And to be honest with you, I think you were getting screwed. But nobody ever said to you, "Hey, quit dealing with that. Let's focus on how to win."
That's what you get when you focus. I mean, when you leave it in the hands of a court-appointed attorney. And I'm being honest with you. That's why I sympathize with mothers and fathers because they're so clueless, especially when you never been through this, never had to do it even with your own parents. You come from a different world, different upbringing, and then you're stuck with this demonic entities dictating who you are.
Right.
And
So what I'm talking about,
right.
you never got to experience because
No.
you were stuck in the initial phase in the frustration and emotional roller coaster. You never got a chance to move on.
No.
What I'm telling you about is moving on in the case, and even though you got screwed, how to still win your case.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I can't tell you because I can't control social workers. I can't control decisions judges make. Okay. There's nothing I can do about that. What I can do is tell you if the social worker does this and if the judge decides this, what you can do to turn it around and get your children back.
Well, that's really funny that you say that because when you reviewed my case, you said I was screwed big time, and when I hired you to get involved in my case, you got me my daughters back within, I think it's the third or the fourth court hearing. I can't remember. Was it the third court hearing or the fourth?
It was the second, but who's counting?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Second court hearing. So I realized then that's why I always tell people this, and I'm not saying that because you're on the show, face to face with me right now. But that's why I tell people all the time, I decided to work for the best of the best for a reason. And that's why I would never leave you.
But
It's
you know
so
what?
weird. It's like your work is fantastic.
I want to tell you why I was successful in your case.
Mm-hmm.
To get you visits and overnights with your kids.
You got me 50-50 custody, Vincent, if you recall.
I don't recall that, but this is the reason why I was able to basically drag you from zero. I didn't focus on how bad you were treated in the legal system.
Mm-hmm.
If I focused on how bad you were treated in the legal system, you still would not have overnight visits with your kid. You wouldn't have that. You still would not have unsupervised visits with your kids. All I knew is how to do is to get you those things. And I did not want to look at how bad you were treated previously. And the funny thing is,
You didn't
a
want to
lot,
focus on that.
yeah, the funny thing was, and even till today, you like to bring that up, and I don't want to hear about it. But
You know what? You're right. When we're
it
driving to court together, I bring it up and I see the expression on your face, kind of like, oh shit, here we go.
right, because it's a wasted conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? But but I get it, because the trauma was so much with
Yes,
you,
it
okay,
was.
that it was a big impact on your life. I get it.
Yeah.
But if you call me up and you're paying me for an hour
Mm-hmm.
consultation, or you're paying me by the hour to represent you, you're really wasting your money,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I'll listen to you. I'm not going to be rude, but you're not getting your money's worth. Let me strategize. Let me tell you how to win, or how to have the best chance of winning. We're on module 5 or 6, and you're telling me about how you were screwed at module 1.
Because nobody heard from module. I'm talking about for mothers right now, or fathers, because
Okay.
their court-appointed attorney didn't want to hear about module 1 when
But
module 1 existed. I
it's
mean,
over. It's over. It's
right,
done.
but a parent in general doesn't. They can't think like an attorney. You think like an attorney, right? They have another attorney who is an idiot, who's telling them information. You're telling them information, but they're missing their children. Holidays, Mother's Day, Christmas, Easter, you name it, and they still don't have their kids. The dramatic stress on mothers. I mean, I'm not excluding fathers. I mean, I have so much respect for dads because I love my dad. But on the mother, the traumatic stress on a mom is so bad, Vincent. So bad. You feel like you're lost. But sometimes they use you as their therapist. Or when they pay for a consultation, they think that you can be the therapist and the advisor attorney at the same time, right?
Okay,
Um,
but I'm not a therapist.
oh,
I
hell
don't
yeah, I know
I,
that.
I don't claim to be. And I'm not. I don't have any experience at that.
Mhm.
But the law thing, if you want to talk about that, I have a lot of experience with that.
Yeah, but that's why I tell you, but as a parent, things at the time, that's why I tell them get some sleep, eat right, drink a lot of water, because the CPS system wants you to be torn down. They don't want you to think for yourself or know what to do. So you need to be alert, you guys. You guys need to be alert, especially when you talk to Attorney Davis.
I've often thought this. There was a guy that used to be a co-host, and then he had his own show on our platform, and he was a therapist. And
Oh my God.
he and I had a parting of the ways. But one of the things that he did do
Mm-hmm.
was he approached the case from a therapist point of view. Because he was a therapist. He didn't do the legal thing because he wasn't a lawyer. But
Mm.
one of the things that he did do that helped people is help them, reel it in from the emotional point of view. And he would tell them, hey, look, you know, um, if you want to vent about the case, come on the show and talk to me about the case.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a very popular show because people did want to vent about the case. He said, but look, when you talk to Davis, limit your stuff. And I never told him to do this, but he just knew. He figured it out. He says, when you talk to Davis, talk about the legal stuff. Talk about
Mm-hmm.
how to win. He says, because Davis not going to be able to tell you, or give you information about how to feel better, right? Because that's not his thing. But if you want to try to figure out how to win, he'll be, he's good for that. Maybe we should find a therapist that can come on the show and, or have their own show on this platform and talk to people.
I actually have two of them actually.
That'd be great. That
Yeah.
would be great.
I
Because
will talk to them. I'm meeting one of them tonight. I will talk to her when I see her. The other one I would have to call her and ask. But there
Because
is,
I wanted to say this. You know, when I was growing up, I don't know if you know this about me, but I played a lot of tennis, and I was
yes,
played competitively. And there was a book that came out, and I can't remember what the title of the book, but it was famous, and it was about the mental game of tennis, the mental game. And there's so much about the mental game of anything, and there's so much to the mental game of a CPS case or any case. And a lot of people that I talk to or come in contact with don't realize that. But lawyers, including myself, we're not qualified to talk to you about the mental game, because each parent, each relative, they're all in a different, they come to me or come to you at different stages. You know, on a scale of 1 to 10, they could be a 0, or they could be a 5, or they could be an 8. You know, they're just in different places, and they need somebody to work with regarding the mental game. And I think if we had a therapist or two on the platform that they could do a show and, you know, take questions, that would be great, because they could focus on the mental game. And I just focus on the, you know, the law game. And I tell this to people all the time, and they find this hard to believe. You know, when you deal with a social worker, they're using psyops on you. They're
yep,
using they're using psychological warfare on you.
mm-hmm,
You don't realize it, but they're trained at that. You know, psychological warfare on you. You know, the Army does it. Social workers are trained in it. They're trained how to get what
break
they
you,
and get what they want.
mm-hmm,
Get the
break you,
information. Get
yep,
information from you, and to try to persuade you to do what they want you to do.
mm-hmm,
Especially give information that you don't realize will be used against you and used to keep your children away from you. That's one of the main reasons why I tell people don't talk to a social worker without me being present. You know, this past week, I was up in San what is it? San Joaquin County, and I was picked up by a client husband at the airport, Sacramento, and he drove me to the court. And on the way to court, he tells me something that I had actually forgotten, that he had researched. And in the Welfare and Institutions Code, there's a code section, I think it's 16,501. Well, in that section, it says that you have the right to have your attorney at meetings between you and the social worker.
mm-hmm, yep,
You have the right. We're not talking about the constitutional right, which you have a constitutional right as well, but you actually have a statutory right to have your to have your attorney there as a support person. I will tell you that any social worker or social worker's attorney will tell you that you don't have that right, and we don't have meetings with attorneys. So after we finish the case, we're sitting in the conference room, me, my client, the mother, the father, this new social worker on the case, the social worker supervisor, and the social worker's attorney. And the father's, you know, just talking, and he says, and I want my attorney, talking about a guy that's not even in the meeting, there. And my client says, well, I want my attorney there. He can be there on the phone or Zoom. Because the case is in what did I say?
San Joaquin,
San Joaquin County. And, you know, I'm in Los Angeles. And the social worker's attorney says with such authority, attorneys are not allowed to be present in these meetings. Now, he and I had just been talking about this on the drive from the airport. And he says, well, yes, they are. And she says to him, well, do you have authority for that? Right? He says, well, as a matter of fact, I do. And she says, what is it? And he says, it's 16,501 of the Welfare and Institutions Code. And he gives her the section and the subsection and the subsection. So he gives her, like, you know, all the alphabet. She looks it up on her phone, and you could just see the shock on her face because she didn't know that. And I'm just sitting there. I'm not saying anything. And I'm biting my tongue. But for all of you folks out there that are at least in California and probably in other states, in the code itself, it says your attorney has the right to be there, or you can demand that your attorney to be there. It's actually in the code. And I've noticed that in some counties, they are objecting less. But they do say in the beginning, oh, we don't allow attorneys there.
What? That's true. I heard it's also in LA County too.
Yeah. But I've noticed a lot less objections.
Mhm.
Now I get more of, oh, if Davis is going to be there, our attorney has to be there, which is okay. I mean, that makes sense. We have to reschedule.
They have no chance.
But if you're in California and they want to have a CFT meeting or any meeting, look at 16,501, and I forget the other alphabets, the subsection. It says that you can bring the attorney as a support person to the meeting. And when you show that to the social worker, and the social worker shows that to her supervisor, and they show that to their county council, they're going to be very surprised because a lot of them don't know that.
Wow. There's a case that we flew together to that case, if you recall. I think it was Sacramento, if I'm not mistaken. The judge didn't know the law. You mentioned something in court that was like a year ago. You mentioned something in court, and then the judge had to go and check it out. Like the judge had to actually check it out. And then she said, you're right. Attorney Davis was right. I forgot what it was. And then the minor counsel kept arguing that it's not true. I can't remember, but I hope you remember who I'm talking about.
I don't remember, but I don't remember the exact law that we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I do recommend I remember the situation,
Mm-hmm.
but to the judge's credit, the judge looked it up and then said, you know what, you're right.
Mm-hmm. And the minor counsel was pissed off. She blew up in court. Yeah.
Because I don't think she realized that all of this time she had been arguing the wrong thing or arguing the wrong law. And it was, it was such a conviction that I realized she wasn't misstating the law, purposely. She honestly believed that was the law.
But how can they be appointed by the court if they're so stupid?
No, it's not stupid. It's just a mistake.
Not about mistake. No. A lot of them.
No, I've made mistakes before. I thought something was the law and I was wrong. It's just human. She wasn't stating something purposely or misstating something purposely. The conviction she had was she really believed that. She really believed that the law said something else. But she was just mistaken. Have you ever believed something that you later found out was not true? Of
Yes.
course you have. Of course you have. Yeah. We all have that or have done that. As a matter of fact, several years ago, the University of Chicago did a study, and they found out that 85% of everything we believe is false. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, I can.
85%. Everything of our personal beliefs are false.
How
do we walk around life making decisions that are actually not true?
Makes sense. But you know what? When it comes to your children, actually, guys, you guys need to really think about the well-being of your children. Even if you don't have money to hire an attorney, at least consult with Attorney Davis for at least an hour. I mean, I have people who actually consult with him I always tell people the consulting package works if you're at a sound mind. And I'm being honest, but if you're emotional, um, going out of your mind, you're not going to be able to do what Attorney Davis tells you to do. You're going to blame it on him anyway. So I suggest not to do that. But
That's
if
what
you're at what?
that's why I said, having a therapist back on the platform
Mhm.
that can talk to people just on the show or talk to them privately, I think would be very valuable.
I'll speak with her. I'm
Yeah,
having dinner with her tonight, anyways. I'll speak with her.
because it's such, losing your children is such an emotional thing. I can only imagine. It's never happened to me personally, but I can only imagine, the shock of it. I mean, I know how my child is grown. But if that had happened to me, I'd probably go crazy.
No, I think you're the kind of guy, and you always have been, that will fight in a way where they don't know it's coming. You're very calm, and
But
they
but
hate it when people are calm.
but not with respect to my personal
That's
problems.
true. You're right. You're right.
With your problem, I'm calm. But if it was my kid, I wouldn't be calm.
Hmm.
I'd be pissed off. So I can, I kind of understand the way these people feel,
Yeah.
right? I get
That's
it.
why they need to vent out every
I,
day, because it's not easy.
I get it.
Not easy. And that's why, but venting out with an attorney is not going to help, because I tell people this: Davis is an attorney. He thinks like an attorney. He acts like an attorney. He lives his life as an attorney, meaning after hours, he's still an attorney. His mind is set that way. Correct me if I'm wrong, Davis. Your mind is set that way. One time I was talking to him about something, and he's talking to me like an attorney. I said, it's after work hours. Speak to me like a human, not an attorney. And he said, I can't change that. And he's right. He can't change that. If he can, then he's not a really good attorney, because his brain has to always be on that set mind of an attorney. And it took me a while to understand that. It took me a while to understand that. But sometimes you need to step back and just
It,
be
took-
quiet.
it took you 13 years to understand
Shut
that.
up, Davis. But it took me a while. But sometimes, like I said, you have to sit back quietly and kind of work on yourself, be able to understand who you're talking to, who you're dealing with. And when you talk to Davis, and I tell people this all the time, do not speak to him like he is your psychiatrist, like he is your therapist, or he is your, you friend. He's not. His mind is not like that. His mind is not set up that way. Okay. And I realize that, yes, he's a great attorney, and I'm not saying that because he's here again. I've seen him in court, and as God is my witness, and I put this on the Holy Bible, that man is brilliant. There's no one compares to him. In my opinion, no one compares to him, because I've seen him in action. And I tell other attorneys that. I have two attorneys who are friends of mine, and I tell them that, and I say it to their faces now. No one compares to him. No one.
I just been doing it a long time, right?
No,
This
no.
this
Your
is where
demeanor in court. No, 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 no. It's not about. I understand you're doing it for a long. You did it for a long time. I've seen your demeanor in court. There's some kind of respect there.
well,
When
it's
you
only
walk in that damn room, I've seen people clear their voice, their throats. Court appointed attorneys, minor counsels, clearing their throats. They're like looking at you like, you know,
it's
they're
only the
dreading the moment.
no, they're only acknowledging the experience, not the person. It's just the experience I have. Because there's not many people that are doing this that have done this type of law, like 36 years.
With all due respect, Vincent, there's an attorney in mind that does practice CPS, not as long as you have, but he's dumb as hell. Okay. And, let's be honest here. He's so stupid. He thinks the only way to win is being aggressive. And his mindset is not, he doesn't think like an attorney. He thinks like a thug. And honestly, I have no respect for that person, but I'm not going to mention any names. Um, but there's a huge difference between, there's attorneys that's been doing it as long as you, Vincent,
No,
and they're still stupid as fuck. I'm
but
sorry, as hell.
but that's all a function of developing as an attorney. I used to be that way.
No
I used to be
way.
yeah, I used to be that way.
No way. You mean you to tell me you used to go to court and blah 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 shout and blah 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 shout
Oh
shout
yeah.
shout 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 shout,
Oh
and you
yes.
think you're gonna win?
Yes.
Hell no, I don't believe you.
Yeah. But here's something
I
that
don't believe
changed
you. I'm sorry.
in the early 2000s. I went through a transformation when I went to the Jerry Spence Trial Lawyers College. It's true. And the person who recommended me to go to that college did so because later he told me, he says, I see you had the raw skill, the raw talent. He said, but you needed it to be polished.
So it's kind of like a boot camp.
No, it was more than that. It was much more than that. It lasted, 3.5 weeks.
But you carry that same mindset in your life through.
Right, because
I mean, I've dealt with you for 13 years. Mhm.
But you didn't know me prior to that.
No.
Yeah, you didn't know me.
Mm-mm.
You first met me way after the Spence College. I had already, started I was way into the transformation. You didn't know me before that. The transformation was so significant that at the time, my wife and kids prayed that I would go to more Spence functions. It's true. It's absolutely true.
Wow.
Yeah.
I am,
So the person that you're talking about just needs to go through the transformation. I mean, I think that all attorneys or most attorneys go through that transformation.
but
We're at different stages in our career. I'm almost at 40 years. That person may be at 20 years. A lot happens between 20 and 40 years. You think a 20-year attorney is the same as 40? No. You think a 1-year attorney and a 5-year attorney is the same? No. You think of this the same, a 5-year attorney and a 20-year attorney is the same? Nope. You think a 25-year attorney and a 35-year attorney are the same? Not at all. Not at all.
it's just
Not only have I been them, but I know people who have been them. And I know people now. And I've had a lot of attorneys that have worked with me over the years, a lot. And it's just the experience. It's not education that you can just buy, but it's, the education plus the experience.
I would love to have that type of experience when it comes to Jerry Spence. I know I'm not an attorney, but I would like to go to seminars like that, to be honest with you, because life is so hard and sometimes you're just fed up. When you go through so much trials in life, you're fed up, and especially when you don't like to ask for help.
At one time, I don't know if it's still this way, when the Trial Lawyers College was run by Jerry, Jerry's not affiliated with it anymore. He broke off and he has his own college called the Jerry Spence Method. But at one time, the college allowed attorneys for weekend events to bring your support staff. So the support staff would go to the 4-day events and be trained almost the same as the lawyers, because the college realized that the support staff, were having just as much interaction with the client and the witnesses as the attorney. So they should also be trained the way the attorney is being trained to give the client, better service. So I know a lot of, I could tell you their names, but I won't. Big time attorneys, in California, well, actually all over the country, that would bring their staff to be trained along with them at weekend events, given by the Trial Lawyers College.
Oh my God, I would love that kind of chance, honestly.
I don't know if they still do it. I should probably call somebody that's still involved in the college and see if they still do it. But
That would be great.
if you went to one of these, you would find it life-changing. You would find it life-changing. I know
I would like that.
it's easy to say, and I can't really explain it to you. You'd have to experience it yourself.
I think I would like that.
I was a completely different person. Forget about different attorney, just a completely different person.
Is there any way you can find out?
You can call them yourself, triallawyerscollege.com.
Okay.
And stay on their weekend events. They never did it for the full, 3.5 week college, but call Trial Lawyers College and say, hey, for your weekend events, when the attorney goes, can he bring his staff? And you have to pay for it, right? You have to pay for it just like you were an attorney.
I think it can be more than 1,000, right? Or
no, it's probably more than 1,000. At that time, it was like $1,500 for the weekend, and that.
Oh, it's a weekend, so Saturday, Sunday, like that.
It was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Oh, that's not bad.
No.
4 days, right?
Mm-hmm. And Sunday was always a half day, so it always ended like at noon on Sundays.
Honestly, if it can transform someone, it's worth it.
But you have to, it can transform you, but it's like anything else. You have to kind of buy into it. You have to like accept it. When I first went to a Trial Lawyers event, it was up in the Monterey area of California.
Monterey Park or up north?
Monterey, County of Monterey.
The Bay, okay.
And I went to the event, and it was Thursday, Friday. I think it was Friday afternoon. My roommate, who was an attorney from Atlanta, says to me, Vince, this is bullshit. I'm going to fly back home, but I don't want to go leave the program by myself. I want you should leave too. And I thought to myself, well, that's a lot of nerve of the guy, but I feel the same way. This is all bullshit. I think we should leave. Well, I booked the flight back home.
Oh my God.
And at that time, there was a Monterey airport, and Southwest flew frequently between Monterey and LAX, not every hour. But my roommate couldn't get a flight from there to Atlanta. The only scheduled flight was his flight on Sunday afternoon. So he says to me, okay, Vinny, I can't get a flight. I got to stay. So you have to stay. And I'm like, I already booked my flight. He goes, no, if I'm saying you got to stay. So I stayed. I finished out the weekend. And one of the things that happened, like on Saturday afternoon, I was in a small group, and we were in a meeting room, and I was taking notes, and the executive director at that time comes up to me and she says, hey, can I borrow your pad? And I said, sure. And I was going to give her a couple sheets. She goes, no, I need the whole thing. And I said, well, what do you need it for? And she snatches it out of my hand, and she walks over to the fireplace, because it's like January, I think. and she throws the whole thing into the fireplace to help start the fire. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? And she goes, don't worry, you don't need to take notes. Just listen. Just listen. She goes, you don't know how to listen. And I kind of looked around and I noticed nobody's taking notes. I was like the only dummy taking notes.
You say that to me sometimes.
Yeah. I was just,
You're not listening.
yeah, you're not listening. I there was an attorney, I won't mention his name, that used to work for me. And he does juvenile dependency and family law now.
Mm-hmm.
And this was way after I had been to the college. And he had a habit that whenever he did a trial, he feverishly took notes, no matter who was talking. His witness, the other party's witness, the judge, he was always taking notes. And that meant he wasn't listening. And he was taking notes, and I used to tell him, hey man, don't take notes, just listen. Because I don't know if you know this, your brain remembers everything. It's your ability to recall that is the problem. And I said, just listen. And he, of course, I was sitting in the back watching the trial. He was doing a trial, and he was feverishly taking notes. And the judge says something to him, and he's taking notes. He doesn't respond. And then the judge says it again. He's taking notes. He doesn't respond. And the judge looks back at me because she knows I'm his boss. And then she says it again. And he kind of looks up like, what? She stands up and she walks off the bench. And he turns around and looks at me like, what's going on? Like, what happened? And, we went outside. It was obviously a break. I said, Mark, you're not listening. He says, I'm taking notes. And I said, I told you to stop taking notes. You don't need to take notes. You need to listen. So.
But when you listen, you're writing down what you're hearing. So.
No. You'd be surprised. One of the big things about the Trial Lawyers College that I found is one of the things that they do at every session, especially weekend session, there's a great amount of time spent on learning how to listen. And it's so important for lawyers and clients who are going to be testifying to learn how to listen. Because when you're on the witness stand and you're testifying, you need to listen to what the questions are. Because sometimes people answer questions that aren't asked, and that affects your credibility. Sometimes people answer questions, but they're answering the question they want to answer, and that affects your credibility. And a lot of times I tell people, hey, that's not the question I ask. I know you want to tell me more, but let's right now focus on the questions I ask. And a lot of people get offended. Like, it would be like, hey, I say, hey, what's your full name? I'll say, ma'am, what's your full name? And you say, well, I'm going out to dinner tonight at, Spago's. Well, I didn't ask you that. But you want to tell me that. But that's not what I asked you. And if you say that on the witness stand, you're going to be looked at as not credible, because you're not answering the question. And even if you say, well, I'm going to Spago's for dinner tonight, and my name is Georgette Truen, you're still not really answering the question. You're not giving a straight answer. And people are so used to not listening and communicating with each other by not listening. We just accept it with our friends and family. But when you go to court, that's a whole different thing. I always tell people court is a false reality. And a lot of people don't get the significance of that. they still feel that, they can win doing things the way they do things. And it's not true.
Oh, and also, I just want to make this clear to a lot of people: do not do not try to get sympathy in court. So don't think that.
I wouldn't agree with you. I wouldn't agree with you. There's certain ways how to get sympathy. Okay. And I was telling this to someone else. People like, judges like, juries like children, animals, and victims. So in order to be a victim, there's a certain amount of sympathy, but you can't overdo it, right?
That's what I meant. You cannot be so dramatic
Right.
to the point you're doing it as an act to get sympathy.
But anyway, it's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah,
But
I know.
getting back to the Trial Lawyers College, call them. I would love to go back. I haven't been to a seminar in several years now. I still have a lot of friends that are active at the college, and I would love to go to another weekend session or start going to weekend sessions. And if they could, if you can bring your staff, that would be great. I know a couple of the attorneys that work with us now should probably go.
I think so. I'm gonna find out, and yeah, I'm gonna find out. Because I really would love that. Like I said, you need to kind of sit back and kind of just do things in a way where it's gonna help you along, in your life. And I think knowledge, obviously, we all know knowledge is power. And if you feed yourself with knowledge, you're going to gain that power to help you or your family along life trials and tribulation. Am I right, Attorney Davis?
You're right. I wanted to tell you there's a book that was kind of like the textbook of the Trial Lawyers College, written by
Which one
Jerry.
is that?
It's called Win Your Case.
Win Your Case?
You can buy it on Amazon. And I highly recommend that book to anyone. And it's written for anyone.
Oh,
not
Jerry
just lawyers.
Spence wrote this.
Jerry Spence, yeah.
Yeah.
Win Your Case. It's not written just for lawyers, but if you're a lawyer or if you're someone trying to win a legal case, it's must reading. Because it's about how to persuade in any situation every time.
I'm actually going to order this book now.
When I first read it, I really didn't understand it because it was such a different way of thinking than I had been, raised. I was in my 40s. I had gone 40 years and I never thought like that. I never knew anybody that thought like that, at least knowingly, right? So when you first read it, at least for me, I was like, what are they talking about? I didn't know that was a formula for success. And, I can tell because a lot of people I talk to, I tell them my formula for success in a case, CPS case, whatever. And most people are like, what are you talking about, Davis? Because they don't know this formula. Right?
Wow.
So it's just foreign to them, as it was foreign to me. And you know how it's hard for us to accept things that are new, things that are different, that we don't know about.
True.
Let's say you're 40 years old, Miss G, although I know you're not, but so let's say you're 40 years old. You've gone through your life 40 years.
Yeah.
Your parents, your education, your experiences. You think you know everything, or you believe that.
Yeah, I do.
How could you not know certain things? But I can tell you, there are a lot of things that you don't know. And you don't even know you don't know them. And when you talk to an attorney about your case, and the attorney tells you something that's completely foreign to you, it's hard for you to accept that. So now, you don't know whether to trust your attorney or not, because he's telling you some crazy shit that you never heard of. So now the attorney's got to go through the whole education process of, bringing you into the fold, teaching you the secrets that you've never heard of.
Yeah.
Because, well, it was true for me. My family had no clue about this. My family wasn't college educated. They certainly weren't lawyers. No grad school. I was raised
That's
by my
true.
grandfather. I was raised by my grandparents. My grandfather was a janitor for the post office. My grandmother was a maid, and then she went to work at Lockheed Aircraft during the Second World War, putting together, planes and, things like that.
Even if your family is educated, like even if your dad speaks 5 languages, went to college, got his doctoral degree, whatever, when you're not an attorney, you've never been through this, you're not going to understand. No matter who you are, you're not going to understand.
Okay. So Jerry has a bunch of books. A lot of them are political, but there's another book that he wrote probably 10 years before he wrote Win Your Case. And it's called How to Argue and Win Every Time. And that was written 10 years before Win Your Case. And that's an oldie but a goodie. So if you want to...
Is that why you want to win all the time when we argue?
I do win all the time. You just don't know it.
You do. Us know. And I'm like, what the fudge is that? You just drive me crazy. Oh my God.
So if you want to buy 2 books on Amazon, buy Win Your Case by
I already ordered it.
Jerry with a G, and then How to Argue and Win Every Time by Jerry Spence. Jerry with a G.
That's going to be dangerous. You like to win, and if I read that book and I learn his techniques, and I'm going to be winning when we argue, Vincent.
No, because I'm 25 years ahead of you, right? You'll still be a grasshopper.
A grasshopper. I'm always going to be a grasshopper.
You'll need 25 years to catch up, and by that time I'll be dead.
God forbid! Don't say that. Please do not mention that word. Do not mention that word. God forbid. God forbid. But yeah, I already ordered that one book. I'm gonna have to look for the other one. But there's a lot of books on there, especially how to win a deposition, and yeah, there's a lot of books out there. But the one that I like, I actually read your family law divorce book. I finished last night, the last page last night, and I like that book a lot. The divorce one, how to win your divorce case in California. And there's another book I haven't read yet, but it's also a divorce book. I read that. I mean, I want to read that one next. But how to win your divorce case in California. That's a good book, Vincent. I don't know if a lot of people know about this, but he has a book about divorce in California, family law, divorce and custody. There you go. Family law, divorce and custody. And you also have a real estate book. I haven't read that yet either. I couldn't believe it. I gave one to my cousin, and he's like, "Oh, I would love to talk to this man." It's like, how many books do you have, Vincent? You have a lot of books, but you don't discuss that with anyone.
Yeah, I probably have like about 13.
Yeah.
I don't know if you even know this, but I have like four or 5 divorce books.
No, I only have 2. The only ones that were in the office were, well, the ones I saw were 2.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have more, I would love to see it. I'm actually passing them around, to be honest with you. People that's going through custody and divorce, I'm passing them around.
I'm in the middle of revising the CPS book.
I hope you do. We need more pages in that damn CPS book.
The problem is when I wrote it, I didn't think people would really read it if it was too long.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it was too long, people wouldn't read it. So I try to make it as brief so they can just get the basic issues.
No, they need more. They need more body language. They need attitude adjustment. They need to be able to know that their behavior in court is not going to help them. There's a lot of aggression going on, and I think you need to put that in a book, or maybe advise them to seek help or something. I mean, give them more that they're going to be dealing with.
I don't think people are interested in that.
But how in the hell are they going to win if they can't work on themselves?
That's why I said when we had the therapist on the platform, that was one of the best things. You know, one of the most beneficial things that I've ever had on this platform were the therapist, and then when you used to do that prayer show.
Oh yeah, the prayer show. I miss doing that.
Those were two of the most beneficial things I've ever had on this platform. I mean, you know, talking about the law is, you know, it's okay. But when people really need help with the mind game and the spiritual game.
Spiritual warfare, I like to call it. Yeah, I think I will start doing the show again, the prayer show again.
I mean, at least, you know, once a week. I mean, I think it's something that people need spiritually, that strength to help get them through these, because this is some of the toughest times they'll ever go through.
Why
Losing
not?
your children, I don't think there's anything
Worse.
Yeah, there's nothing worse.
Nothing worse. I'm sorry, nothing worse.
Right. You
Than
can
losing
lose your job, you can lose your home, you know,
your car.
yeah, but your kids, nothing worse,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
Nothing.
Yeah, Dorothy says, what does she say? Prayer is great.
Yeah. I think my prayer show got so much attention.
Yeah, I noticed that. I noticed that when Grace would send me reports on, you know, the viewership, I noticed that the prayer, you know, show was very popular and viewed by a lot of people. And I thought, wow, that's very interesting. A legal platform, the prayer show and the therapist show was the most popular. Not the legal stuff, the prayer and therapist.
Like I said,
Who would have ever thought of that on a CPS legal show?
no one.
Yeah.
They don't have time. I mean, I honestly, a lot of people don't understand. You had a show once. Excuse me. I'm getting over a flu. You had a show once when you said, you know how it feels crying out for your mom and your mom is not there. You mentioned that in a show once, and that just touched, and I never forget that show. I can't remember which show was, but you mentioned that. And then you said that you were raised by your grandparents and you would cry for your mom. You wanted that mother relationship. And you know, your friends had it, you didn't have it. Some of your friends had it, you didn't have it. You know how it feels like being away from your own mother. And that really touched me to my core. Even when we fight, I always remember those words from you. And it just, you do things with compassion, but you're just a badass on the outside. Did I say that right?
I don't know.
See, you just don't want to. You don't want to admit it.
I know one thing. We're way over the time limit on this show.
See, you don't like it when I mention that. I always change the subject.
No.
Always.
Believe it or not, I have a meeting at the office today at 10:30.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, go to your meeting there, man.
All righty. Thank you, everyone, for viewing. We'll see
Are you
everyone
doing it
tomorrow.
tomorrow?
Yeah, I do the show every day, Miss G. Office hours at 6:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
I will pray for you, Mr. Davis.
All right, everyone, have a blessed day and stay safe. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
The only thing I've done since I've been his client is relax. And I'm telling you, that is something that for the last year and a half I have not been able to do. And I'm doing that now, and I am excited about it. He gets 5 stars and above. His assistants, the receptionists, are even phenomenal. Mr. Davis, I can't thank you enough. I will never be able to thank you enough for what you've done, for listening, for just giving me your ear and your attention, for not ever approaching me as that my situation is too small for you, or you too big for my situation. You've always treated me with the utmost respect, and my family, my baby, myself, we cannot thank you enough for helping us to defeat our giant. And I will always appreciate you for that. Thank you.